I'm grateful that I went through the experience because I had to be with my parents when they filed Chapter 7. I was with them when we had to move out of our house that I'd lived in my entire life. They raised their entire family in for 30 years. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, we have $12,000 in a shoebox and it's in the attic above our closet there. And I'm not telling you that for any other reason than we need you to know where it's at in case we need you to get it. But that's literally all we have.
Jace, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, you're a fellow Barn Talk guest. That's where we made the connection when I was up there earlier this year. I think you were on last year, but after I recorded with Torque, he said, you need to meet this guy, or I need to introduce you to Jace. And I think that's how we got connected and had a conversation that we'll get into today. But, just kick it off with your story. That's what really drew me in when you shared your story, which was very similar in a way to my story, but let's hear yours.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, doing the interview and everything with Torque and on Barn Talk was awesome. The only downside, I did it the first part of December there. I don't know when you went in and met with them, but when I went in there, it was about 26 degrees. all the flow heaters, everything was running in there. So he said to bundle up before he went in there, but it was overall good experience. But yeah, man. So, my background, my story is I grew up on a big family farm operation and feed yard in Western Kansas, a small town called Tribune. So if you're ever traveling out to Denver or something like that, going on I-70, you basically go through a town called Goodland, Kansas. It's the last town in Kansas, essentially, and we're about an hour south of there. But yeah, so inside of our operation, my granddad started the entire thing back in the 50s. He did it with basically a handshake loan from a banker in Denver, and started from nothing. My granddad went through the dirty 30s in Kansas, and he used to tell us stories and everything around that, to where I think his childhood experience really sparked a massive level of motivation in him to try to go make something of himself and do what needs to be done, and to to be able to support his family and just build a different life than what he grew up with. But yeah, so he started the operation back in the 50s. It was basically, when I was growing up, we had a 14,000 head feed yard. My dad grew up building that feed yard and building the bunk lines and everything that went into that place. And then had a few thousand acres of ground. And then we also had a grain elevator facility there as well. And so my granddad, he'd built a big operation, when it's finally went under in 2005. It was doing 10 to 15 million a year in revenue and had a $6 million operating line of credit. And my granddad fed all of his own cattle and everything like that. So, that's kind of my story there. I grew up on the feed yard side of things, and, not going to say I enjoyed working cattle every day, because it definitely was. You get into the dog days of summer and everything. It's definitely not very fun out there. But, the life lessons and just work ethic you pick up from growing up on the farm, like that has obviously contributed to where I'm at today. And, things that I hope to instill in my kids as they get older too.
When you looked at that operation growing up, did you think of it as a big successful operation, or was the writing on the wall that it was going to go under?
Yeah, no, not at all. It was a big successful operation, right? Or at least from every side of things that I could look at in my perspective, growing up and witnessing it all, and again, growing up as a kid on the operation and stuff like that, you're kind of blinded. I was spoiled as a kid, meaning I got whatever I wanted. I had a dirt bike and, all that stuff that was important or whatever, big to you when you're growing up and everything, not realizing that, hey, there's some big dollar amounts floating around on the backside here. And my granddad was, controlling a big operation, and there was a lot of money at risk every year. But it was really like stepping into the 2000s when we started to enter, the internet age, and everything started to take off there. Local markets became global markets overnight, essentially, right? And I remember my granddad, he just wasn't ready for it. I remember, the operation officially, we had our farm sale in the summer of 2005, if I remember correctly. So there were things that started in 2003 and 2004 where my granddad lost a lot of his own money because, again, 14,000 head feed yard, he fed all of his own cattle. And so lots of risk there. And there was a lot more volatility in the markets at that time than there was back in the 70s and stuff like that there. So, all of those things contributed to him essentially going under. There was one year where he lost about $2 million, and then he tried to jump on the board the next year and started trading contracts and stuff like that, and just swimming in a pool that he was not fit for, and did not understand, the sharks that were lurking beneath the water, and ended up losing another substantial amount of money there the second year. And then, man, within the next 12 to 18 months, we were having a farm sale, and 50 plus years of hard work went under.
What was going through your mind through all of this?
Yeah, it's my perspective is interesting, right? Because obviously I didn't have any financial ties into it. I was, in high school at the time, so obviously I was focused on drinking beer and football and girls and stuff like that, right? But I'm grateful that I went through the experience because I had to be with my parents when they filed Chapter 7. I was with them when we had to move out of our house that I'd lived in my entire life. They raised their entire family in for 30 years. I was there the day that my dad was told that, hey, everything's going under and we're stopping everything and it's done. So I didn't experience the financial stress that my parents felt because that destroyed them. They literally, I remember my dad telling me, shortly after the feed yard closed down, because the bank locked up all the accounts, right? They froze all the accounts and couldn't get access to anything. And so my parents had saved up a nest egg over 30, 40 years of a few $100,000, couldn't access any of it. They lost all that. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, we have $12,000 in a shoebox and it's in the attic above our closet there. And I'm not telling you that for any other reason than we need you to know where it's at in case we need you to get it. But that's literally all we have, And so I got to experience and feel the weight and the emotion of my parents. My parents were married when they were 15 and 17. And so they were definitely like old school in that. Got pregnant with their first child a couple months after they got married. And, they literally never left the operation. The reason my dad asked my mom to marry him is because she was going to move to Oklahoma. And he loved her and was like, well, okay, I guess, yeah, let's just get married then. You'll stay here. And anyway, so they've been together for a long time. So, witnessing them have to go through the emotional turmoil there, especially on my mom's side, right? Because you think about all the opportunity costs and all the things they could have done with their life, and they chose to sacrifice all those options to stay back and try to build the operation there. I think all that came just barreling down on them, and all those years got really heavy there because it all hit at one point when you go through and you lose everything and there's really no explanation, and you go through all the emotions of grief and blame and resentment and looking for answers. And, I got to witness them going through all that and the fights. And, my mom cried basically every night for about 2 years as everything went under. So anyways, I look back at the experience. I'm grateful I went through it because that woke me up at a very young age to what really happens in life. And I think that's obviously contributed a lot to why I've made the decisions that I've made once I became an adult and got a job and had a family and, ended up making the decisions to try to start building Legacy Farmer.
It's so eerie how similar this is to my story. And I shared with you, I mean, my parents, same deal, high school sweethearts. Mom gets pregnant when she's 17. They end up having to get married. They move out to the farm. My dad's working for my grandpa, but this is your story, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm hearing like the same story. Is your grandpa still around? Is he still?
No, he passed away back in 2015. My grandma's still around, but yeah, her days are coming up there. She's getting up there in years.
Do you and your dad talk about those times ever?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what's interesting is I did a documentary, had a guy come out that I know from California, did a documentary back in 2020. And we went down to the feed yard, right? Because everything's still down there. Obviously all the old processing barns and stuff like that. Everything's still there. It's just all deserted now. And has been for a long time. There was a family that bought it, but they only used one small part of the feed yard. Everything else just kind of just went to crap there a little bit. And we did a documentary and went down there and filmed. But what was interesting though too is I asked this person, the guy doing the film, and I said, "Would you interview my parents?" And my dad is very old school. No emotions, no crying, that type of stuff there. And when he did that interview, man, it had been 15 years since the operation had went under, and it was like it happened yesterday to him. And he starts talking about all this stuff and he starts crying on the camera. And I'd never seen my dad cry on camera before. It was super emotional for me too, because you could just feel it. Right. And to me, seeing the operation go under, it's like, that was a blip in my life, right? In the timeline of my life. For him though, that was 45 years of his life, that he's talking about there and just feeling the weight and the emotion of it all. So anyways, I say all that because yes, we do talk about it often. My parents still live in Tribune. And so my dad honestly has to drive by our feed yard, at least a couple times a month there. And, every now and then we'll drive out there and take a look at stuff and just kind of relive the past there a little bit, drive by the old farmhouse, see what's going on there and that type of stuff. Yeah.
So you graduate from high school. What happens next?
So I went, got a typical, 4-year college degree that I don't use today. Probably same as same as a lot of people. And then I got into ag banking after that. And so that was a really important part of my story because, growing up in the operation, I witnessed all the fighting. I witnessed all the resentment. I witnessed, like my granddad and my dad, for example, two guys that worked together every day, but would go a month without speaking. And like that's the type of stuff there that people don't understand unless you grow up on the operation and again, looking back at it, there's a lot of things I learned about what not to do and how not to treat people from my granddad. But the older I've gotten, the more I've recognized why he was the way that he was. And I have to go back and really consider even his childhood, right? And going through the dirty 30s, waking up with literally nothing and trying to figure out how you're going to survive that day. I can see why he was the way that he was. But anyways, going into the bank and stuff, that was a really important part of my journey because growing up in the operation, I understood all the financial challenges, or not the financial, all the operational challenges from working with family and trying to do that type of stuff there as well. The working in the bank took me full circle, and I really started to see the financial side of these operations, and specifically even our operation, because my granddad, the two banks that I worked at, my granddad had applied there to try to get refinancing done and try to survive. So I saw pages and pages of the story and the outline of exactly what happened and that type of stuff there. So that was eye-opening for me. But, the other side of this though too is, with the customers and stuff that I worked with in the bank, man, there's just a massive disconnect between farmer and banker essentially, right? And farmer and finances, and understanding the level of risk that they're taking in making these financial decisions, right? And the thing is, like, we've even seen this with our customers. We've heard this multiple times, like, well, it's just another zero, added to the line. And it's like, man, that's tough. Like when you get to the point where the zeros don't actually mean anything internally to you, gives us the ability to be careless there. And so anyways, being in the bank, I had to go through that because I noticed the gap there between farmer and banker and farmer and finances, but also too, and I've said this to other people, like I was a bad banker. And the reason I say that is because I knew finances very well, knew finances just fine and everything from that side. But when I have two, people sitting across from me at the table and we're walking through finances and they're going to make a $1 million or $2 million purchase decision, and I am needing to, one, protect the interests of the bank. But the problem with me though, I was more inclined to protect the interests of the customer, because to me, that was like talking to my parents right there. And it's like, you don't understand the weights and the size of the decisions that you're making right now. And not only the, consequences that can happen in the next 12 months, but literally 5 to 10 years down the line, even further than that. Right. And then really thinking through this, not only from a financial consequence standpoint, but from a family consequence standpoint, operational, like there's all these different variables that come into play there. And so going through the bank and everything, I left the banking industry in August 2016. Did not have, my wife and I had 2 babies at the time, literally a 3-month-old and a 1-year-old. I had $5,000 in savings. I had no plan. I did not have my wife's permission, up and left the bank, because deep down, man, I knew that place, I was never going to feel any purpose for what I was doing. I knew that I wasn't really solving the problem, again, because yes, I needed to protect the interests of the bank, but I was more inclined to kind of be the rebel a little bit. And I wanted to watch out for the customers on the other end.
I feel like I'm looking in a mirror, man. This is so weird. This story. A couple of things. I got so many questions. I want to make sure that we get enough time to hash all this out. Looking back now, and even like when you were at the bank, did you often question and think about like the decisions that your grandpa made, and even your dad? But the decision you look back and like, if he just would have done this.
Oh yeah,
still have the business if he just would have done that. Because that's where, like, I replay in my mind. I look back now. You don't know what you don't know when you're there on the farm, seeing the operations. But then I look back now. I was like, if they just would have known these numbers, or if they just would have made this decision,
or had this conversation,
yeah,
and man. So that's
and I think about the psychological. It's like, were they just too prideful at the time? Did they not realize that there was resources out there? Teams of people that could probably help and gather around and help to make these decisions.
Well, and the thing is, like with my granddad, for example, right? So growing up in the 30s, and then having nothing, building the operation from nothing, literally handshake deal, taking all the risk. Like, I look back at his journey, and I'm a little bit more graceful towards him now because, again, I just understand, like, I've started to experience things myself, and I had to start Legacy Farmer from nothing. I went into debt over the first 2 years of being an entrepreneur, trying to figure out my pathway and all this type of stuff there.
Mhm.
I have a deeper understanding of why he was the way that he was. But because with him, though, there was this ego that was built over time. Right now, he gets 30 years in the future. He's super successful. He wants to take 100% ownership of that. So when it came to these big decisions, he he wasn't living in the world that we're living in now, where it's like, okay, hey, let me go talk to these people. Let me go get some outside counseling on this, some people that I trust to step in here and just lead me a little bit on this, where he had been right up to that point for 30 to 40 years. So imagine the ego and the level of confidence that builds in somebody, where it's like, no, I know what I'm doing. You go back and do your job. I don't need your help. I know exactly what I'm doing here. And, you ask my dad, what are some of the biggest lessons or takeaways from the operation going under? He would tell you, and he said it in the documentary, I wish I would have asked more financial questions. He goes, I trusted everybody in the office to be taking care of things. I trusted my dad. I trusted, everybody else in there. And he goes, I should have asked more questions and found out for myself there. And so, anyways, yeah, with my granddad, again, I have a lot more understanding of why he was the way that he was, but I also want to make sure that I maintain this level of reality and really what I'll call humbleness. I want Legacy Farmer to be super successful. I want to be super successful, but I don't want to get an ego where I think I'm right, because that's the exact time that God's going to come slap me across the face and give me the wake up call that I obviously need. You know what I mean? And so, but yeah, to your original question there, my dad and I talk about that all the time on just different things that could have been done, or conversations that could have been had to that would dramatically shift that. But I'll confidently say it was my granddad's ego and really his pride that blocked him from being even open to have conversations like that, or looking for that type of advice or counsel.
If I can share, and so similar, and I don't still today know the full picture of the context, because I was, when my grandpa's farming operation went under, we were 2-3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember as a kid, grandpa talking how bad the government was for farmers. And for me, then I grew up having this perception that the government is bad. And now we know that there's bad programs, stuff like that. But for me, it was just like, why did he think the government was so bad, and blaming the government for the outcome of the farm? And I have a little different perception now these days. But again, he kept saying that. I'm like, why was that?
Yeah. And too, right. So some of the work and everything that I talk about with a lot of the customers, in Legacy Farm, but also too, just our team and everybody that I meet in general, everybody has a frame, right? And through that frame is the way that they view the world. And if you think about a picture frame, right, on each side of it, you have different things there that make up your viewpoint of the world. So you have your laws, your rules, which lead to your beliefs, which ultimately you add all those three together, drives your results, right? In the way that you see the world there. And that's where, like, when it comes to this type of situation, I have to look back at my granddad's experience and say, okay, well, what were his beliefs? Where did those spark from? What were the things that he was, shown when he was young, just like your example right there, that he thought was just automatic truth, right? And those beliefs turn into laws and rules and everything there that ultimately drive our results and our actions that we take, because now we have this set perception. Now, with our, the world that we live in today, I feel like there's a lot more people that are working on self-awareness and public awareness as well, and really challenging that frame on how we view the world. That's one thing. That's where I try to say I want to be different than my granddad in that viewpoint, and recognize the fact that business is changing every single year. What it took to be successful last year is going to be different this year. And I need, in order to be able to navigate that and evolve with that, I need to be open to modifying my frame on how I see the world and myself in it, to be able to make those adjustments accordingly.
I want to talk about Legacy Farmer, but I want to talk one other thing, and I think this will spill into it. You talked about your dad and grandpa not having a conversation for a month, or having the disagreements. And we see this all the time. People listen to this podcast, when you have a family business. I experienced it growing up. We had a conference we just hosted several weeks ago, but we had a gentleman that at the end of the conference almost broke down, but he was talking about how he was involved in this trucking business with his dad, and they've had these disagreements, and now they're not talking. And that's a common thread you hear all the time. And again, when you're dealing with these and farming operations, it's the same as these trucking operations we're dealing with that are tied to the farm, some of them, but you get these generational businesses where you have the father saying one thing, the son disagreeing, and then in the middle of it's this business that could be failing because of that,
Yep.
or because of the communication. Talk about that, and then I want to really talk about Legacy Farmer, because I think it all relates together.
Yeah, for sure. So, and like I said, my dad and my granddad worked together every day, but not talk for 30 days. Right. I remember some of those fights there. Like, they were the knockdown, screaming, yelling, go F yourself type of fights there, and it wasn't just, between my dad and my granddad. I witnessed it between my dad and my brother, because my brother's 12 years older than me. So he grew up when my parents were still very young, in their 20s, and they're raising the kid and working on the farm operation, trying to figure life out and everything. So, what, again, seeing those disagreements and everything there, you see the compounding effect of that, right? So the problem with my dad and my granddad always arguing and stuff is, my dad, when I was growing up, he was completely different than the man he is now. And what's interesting is, once the feed yard went under, it was like a light switched for my dad. Completely different version of him. So I grew up with somebody who had high expectations. We were very much a sports driven family, as most people are in small towns and stuff like that. My dad had high expectations for us, on and off basketball court. We were a big basketball family and stuff like that. And my dad, man, I just remember, getting our asses ripped after games and stuff like that for not doing well enough and everything. As I've gotten older, though, and I've done awareness on myself and worked on self-awareness and why I think the way that I think, I start talking about my granddad, maybe start understanding where my dad came from as well. Right. And how, what was he experiencing? Right. Because I only saw him at the end of the night after a basketball game. I didn't see him from, 2:30 to 2:30 in the morning to 3:00 in the afternoon when he was working, because he literally got up at 2:30 every day. Right. I didn't see those conversations that happened between him and my granddad there in the morning. So there was just trailing impacts there, or effects from that type of stuff, where, again, I've had a lot more grace for my dad as well, because, again, once the feed yard went under, it was like this weight and stress was lifted off of him. He could finally stop carrying the backpack there. And all of a sudden now he didn't have all this stress and anxiety there. But, back to your original point there, though, too, and this, again, carries into Legacy Farmer. Those fights and stuff, when they go unhandled, they can turn into years of resentment. But but worse than that are, literally, we had a community call yesterday with some members on there, and we had two different ones share. One of them is entering their 7th year of lawsuits with their family. Another one has entered year 3. And so, again, we talk about these fights and stuff. People are like, oh, it'll blow past and you won't have to worry about it. Whatever. It'll fizzle out over time. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way, guys. Like, there's a lot of things here. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of just, things that people can't let go of. And
that's what I was asking. What's at the crux of that?
I know. Well, and I think a lot of it too, again, has to do with people not doing any work on self-awareness. Like, you really think about it, they're so tied to their frame and how they view the world and their beliefs and their rules and their laws that everything else is BS and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's where,
especially in a small rural farming community, that's probably even more prevalent than a business that might be in a city where there's multiple businesses and how they operate, where it's like, this is the way.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, right? So with us, we had the feed yard, we had a few thousand acres of ground, but then my granddad had a grain facility, right? We had guys delivering grain to us as well. I had a grain elevator. And man, when my granddad went under, it didn't just impact our family. Our name was tainted across the entire, 4-county area there, because there was multiple people that did business with my granddad. And there's people like to this day that have not gotten paid up to $1 million, because of stuff that fell out during that time there. So anyways, I say all the fighting and stuff because those situations there, if people don't find a way to resolve or don't do enough personal work to where they can now step in and have that conversation using, our customers yesterday, one of them in a 7-year lawsuit now with siblings and cousins and stuff like that. That person is literally $600,000 in lawyer fees at this point.
Yeah.
Over what? A fight that obviously started 10, 15 years ago, but that's what it's turned into when those issues don't go unhandled.
So we say all this, give us the elevator pitch. What is Legacy Farmer?
Yeah, I mean, elevator pitch is we help you take your farm finances from a place of chaos and disorganization to a place of financial confidence and clarity. That's the elevator pitch. Now,
And because most people know right now and still today, a lot of these business decisions, a lot of this stuff is still pen and paper on
yes, oh yeah,
paper in the grain truck or in the tractor, not digitized. But I want you to speak on that.
Well, so just, giving you an example right now. So we had somebody come in to Legacy Farmer yesterday, and this is what our enrollment advisor, her name's Tristan, said. His financial tracking system consists of him running numbers on a piece of paper, but lacks consistency and visibility into the repercussions of decision making. Right. So think about this. This person also too has a massive farm operation, several millions of dollars a year in revenue, and they're making decisions by writing it on a piece of paper in their truck. That's just common thing. I'm not talking down to anybody. That's just the world that we live in, and where 90% of people are running the business. And again, the numbers are getting so big today. The cost of not having financial clarity or some level of certainty into those decisions there, as well as I do, it turns into gambling at some point.
Yeah. What's so cool about this? I mean, you can relate this to all business, but like the similarities to this, our listeners that are very deep in the farming community, some of them farmers, but what you just said, I think of trucking as the same issues and problem. Not all, I know, but a lot of people we still hear about today, or in 2025, still most of those decisions are being made on a piece of paper or by looking at how much cash is in the bank.
Yeah, and it's not a small decision, as you know. For some of them, it's a multi-million-dollar decision or a 20-year loan commitment. People, they're not giving these decisions the level of respect that they deserve. So anyways, but so Legacy Farm, that's kind of elevator pitch, right? Because at the foundation of all these issues, my dad and my granddad, or any family and farm and finances, or all that type of stuff, there at the foundation of all of the issues is the finances. That's the starting point. That's where all the emotions are started. That's where all the challenges start. That's where all the bad decision making happens. That's where all these problems start there. So that's why we've kept our focus to where, hey, we want to help solve this foundation, because now once we have that in place, now we can build off of it, and we can now start, maybe it's healing a family there with their family challenges and working with each other or whatever, because now we're making decisions or bringing facts to the table based on numbers versus just what somebody's opinion of, hey, you cost me X amount of dollars. My granddad used to tell my mom when she'd go out and help him move cattle that if she was making them run too fast, he would say, you're costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing that. It's like, where are you getting that from, man? Where are you getting that from? You have no idea. But anyways, when I started Legacy Farmer, I left the banking industry in 2016. I struggled for 2.5 years, had no steady source of income, did some life insurance, did some crop insurance, trying to find, my way and how I could really ultimately help out the industry. When I started Legacy Farmer, it began as really group coaching and consulting. And we talked about operational challenges, right? Working with family, operational challenges, that side. What I didn't understand though, or recognize, was that about 12 to 18 months in, I started getting a lot more financial questions. I had no idea, nor did I ever think I'd be using finances again, or build the product that we have today. Once I started getting all those things, I hired a programmer, and we built the first version of our software called Farmer Metrics on Google Sheets. So I paid $6,000 to somebody. They built out, a bunch of these, fancy formulas, and we started building out that way. And then once I got to where we had about 150 people using it, I got tired of having to manually update everybody's sheets when I was, making an update there. We hired our first software team out of Wichita, Kansas, and started building, first version of our enterprise software. And now, that was back in 21. And now we're, almost $2 million into it. And it's 5 years later. And we've been slow and steady building it with our customers. That's been a huge point for me, and something I'm actually really grateful has happened, because every feature we have in there, every page that's in there, there's intention behind it. And it's something that we know our customers are going to use. We're not launching something and then hoping that they use it. I'm getting data on the back end before we ever even invest the money and say, okay, based on where we're at right now, is this going to help bring more clarity and confidence and certainty into the financial picture of your operation? Yes or no? If it's yes, then we're going to build it. If it's not, then we're going to, ease in, or, go a different route there.
And this can be used obviously for grain farmers in Kansas, but cotton farmer in Tennessee, or potato farmer out in Idaho.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, too, and that's the thing is, truckers. as well, because the majority of our customers have trucking operations, right? They have no clarity into, the finances or financial picture of the trucking operation. And so we have a lot of different customers, all with ag-based businesses using it there. Now, the benefit of our software, a lot of people, they're like, well, isn't it accounting software? And I always tell them, no, you still need QuickBooks or whatever other accounting software, because we're not going through and tagging or, categorizing transactions and stuff like that. This is used in conjunction with that other software there. But the way that I explained it to customers so they can really wrap their heads around it, I said, okay, let's say, I take Jace's farm finances and I put them in front of Jared, another business owner, a banker, and then an accountant. You're all three going to look at my finances and have a different idea of strengths and weaknesses and really what's going on in the business based on your incentives, right? And ultimately, to the frame that which you're looking through it, right? So the accountant is going to look at my finances through the frame of, hey, how can I save this customer as much money as possible on taxes, right? Are they structured here correctly there, right? Banker is going to look at it from the perspective of, okay, do they have collateral for me to take, or do they have assets for me to take as collateral so I can make them loans? But then do they have cash flow as well to pay the loans back? Jared stepping in as a business owner is going to look at it from hopefully the other two perspectives, plus the business owner and day-to-day operations, cash balance, line of credit balance, all these types of things to make sure we can run the operation. Farmer Metrics is built for the business owner and the banker. The accountants can still maintain QuickBooks, and you're still going to use that over there because those books and those reports are giving us completely different information. Whereas Farmer Metrics was built for the business owner and banker, so they know exactly where they're at on a day-to-day basis and know how, buying a piece of ground or buying a new truck or something like that is going to impact their balance sheet. They already know how it's going to impact, their overall position with the bank. Our customers know what leverage they have with the bank and how they can negotiate interest rates, all those types of things there.
Since you've created the software, what has been the most surprising thing people have found out about their farming businesses using it?
Yeah. Biggest thing was, so I'll share two different perspectives. I'll share from my perspective, the biggest thing that I found out, but also too from our customers. From our customers' perspective, just getting some level of financial clarity into where they're at today. I mean, and I'm talking just something as simple as a balance sheet, right? And this is it. It's painful to say this, Jared, but the number one way to be in the top 1% of farmers and ranchers or ag business owners in this country today is have a detailed balance sheet and cash flow projection. Month by month cash flow projection. That's literally all you have to do. It's to me and you, it's like that's simple, right? I thought it was so elementary, and that's why I didn't think I'd ever use my financial background again. Finding out that, hey, man, that's the ace in the hole for me for really helping these people. And that's what's going to be really valuable for them, because just having those two things put together, one, it gives them ultimate clarity into the operation. They actually feel like they have a game plan, but two, we've seen it drop interest rates for people. Dropping 100 to 200 basis points off their operating line of credits because they're structured and organized. Now they're, a less riskier credit to the bank and that type of stuff there. So that's from the customer's perspective. That's been the most eye-opening for them. From my perspective, again, I go back to just how simple this stuff is, right? So from my perspective, I didn't think our tools really are simple, and I want to make them that way for a reason, because otherwise, if it gets too complex or something like that, then people aren't going to use it. But it's just been mind blowing to me to see how something so simple can dramatically impact an operation, not just from a financial standpoint, but man, inside a legacy farmer, I talk about this concept that another mentor taught me called Core 4. So Core 4 covers core key areas of life, body, being, balance, and business, right? So obviously everybody comes into legacy farmer because they want help on the business side. But what we've seen over the years, though, too, is once we get this financial foundation in place, man, we've seen it dramatically turn around marriages. Right now, all of a sudden, husband and wife have a common ground to be able to have these conversations, and it's not just he said or she said, or pulling numbers out of your rear end and hoping that they're right. We've established a good foundation there. But also, too, you want to talk about the real issues inside of the ag industry. Ag industry's suicide rate is higher than every other industry by a significant portion there. And so you think about that, right? Once these guys have some level of financial clarity, just the stress and anxiety that is now released off of them or taken off their shoulders there. That's
like your dad. You mentioned that.
For sure, man, it's a huge thing there. And those are the things that people don't really want to talk about. And we've had people come into the group that they were alcoholics, heavy alcoholics, like drinking a bottle of freaking Captain Morgan every single day or a bottle of whiskey every single day there, just to deal with the level of stress or be able to go to sleep at night, because they just needed something simple that they could wrap their head around, structure, organize, and stuff there. So that's been the good side and the bad side of building the software, because there's a lot of things that we could do, but they would come at a cost of it making things too complex where maybe our customers wouldn't use it.
I guess when I think of the lens of customers, and I can relate because I'm this way as a business owner. I don't like to sit and concentrate and look at the numbers.
Yep.
But I know that's important. But for me, anytime I'm taking that time to sit back, it's like that's less time I'm talking to customer. I mean, I think of farmers, like all the farm work done.
Yep.
But for me, it's like interacting with customers, producing content, getting it out there. I mean, that's I look at that as like not as important or something that it'll fix itself.
Yeah.
As long as I keep performing,
we can outsource it, right? The harder I work, the better. Hard work means more money. And it's like, well, in today's day and age, you and I both know it's a combination of hard work plus working smart.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I can see that as one with, especially a lot of these truckers and farmers, like, hey, I'm too busy. Like right now it's planting season. Mm-hmm. After this, we got to fix this. I don't have time to sit in my office and look at these numbers. Yeah.
And, to talk about a couple customer stories there, we've had people, we've had over 3,000 phone calls with people over the years, since 2019, when I started the company. The number of people, Jared, that have come in a year or two after that first conversation, that they call us, they're ready to now join, because when we had initially talked to them, it was in the middle of planting season, like we're in right now. Our guys are getting out and getting in the field, and they're, I'm just too busy right now. Let's talk about this a couple months. Okay, great. And then they come to us, they say, well, literally nothing has changed, and we've lost more money in the past year or 2 years because we didn't do anything. And so now it's like, okay, so that's where we're reshaping the focus on where farmers find value for themselves inside of their operation, right? And one of the pages that we have inside of our software, and this is for more of the bigger operations, is just a team chart. And the team chart isn't just an org chart, it's a roles and responsibilities chart, which again sounds like an org chart of there a little bit. But what we're doing is showing them and mapping out each seat inside of their operation so they can see and literally put a dollar value on the value of their time for each seat. Right. Because there's a lot of people like you and me. My most valuable part inside a legacy farmer is in what I would call the visionary seat. And then I'm also in the marketing seat as well. But the visionary seat, yeah. So I'm more on strategic relationships. I'm more on casting the vision of the company. Now we have investors and everything. So I need to be managing that. We had a board meeting last week, all that type of stuff, their contracts and making sure. All that type of stuff there. For me now, my most valuable time for the company is not spent meeting one-on-one with customers, new customers coming in, right? I'm not saying that's not valuable. Obviously, it's a huge thing for what we do, but my role has evolved, and that's what we're trying to help these farmers too, because some of them, they come in and they have they're doing 10 million a year in revenue, but they're still spending their days doing $10 an hour work. It doesn't, and they wonder why the operation hasn't grown or why they're losing money. It's because, I understand that their role has changed, and some of them, they don't like it because we're trying to kill off an old identity of them, which is used to going and just working cattle or driving a tractor or whatever, and having to get them refocused on, hey, the best way that I can add value to this company is to actually be in this seat or be in the office looking at finances, because there's all these people beneath me that are their futures and their livelihoods are dependent upon the decisions that I'm making in this office. It's just different.
We're going to talk a little bit how people learn more about you and Legacy Farmer, but I want you to say this because I didn't want you to come on here and sell anything, and you haven't actually. No. It's just talking about the principle. But at the very, very least, and again, this is something I preach to our customers, our members, and all of that. But like, if someone's not going to use Legacy Farmer, what is the most practical thing someone can be doing today as a farmer, trucking company, business owner? Like, just lay it out straight. It's like, if you're not going to use a product like ours, this is the thing you at least need to do.
Yeah. So, for those people, it's just get some structure and organization in your finances. And still, that's why we made the balance sheet and cash flow portion of our software free. So people can still go and do that, and they can at least have some structure and organization. I guarantee if they have a detailed balance sheet and cash flow, you go present that to your bank. We had a customer come in 2 weeks ago, and he went, he did the free trial version of our software and filled out all information, took it to his bank, and the bank dropped his interest rate enough to compensate for the expense of actually investing in the software. That's the type of stuff that we want, man. Otherwise, use it for free. Just get some structure and organization so you don't burn your entire life down, because not only the business is going to go under, but now we talk about body being balance, which balance is going to be your marriage and key relationships. That's the stuff, man. We have our divorce rate inside the industry is massively high. There's just a lot of these things that people just want to pretend that, oh, if I just go work harder, it'll solve those problems. No, it won't. So get the foundation of your business structured, organized, have some clarity in where your finances are at. And then, start taking baby steps from there. But, the other side of what we do, and I'll kind of talk a little bit here just about legacy farming, kind of what's involved into.
Yep.
So we basically have two different, options that people can come in. One, they can, buy the software and just use the software on its own. I have a training program in there that I built out that shows them exactly how to use it. I think, and, my biggest issue with softwares nowadays is there's, even inside the ag industry, there's a lot of great softwares. There's zero training program or actual help on how to use the information inside those software to drive actual decisions that you're making with that day. You know what I mean? And so inside of ours, I have a ton of case studies and real world examples of, hey, when the numbers look like this is what it means. This is how it's going to change your decisions here, or what you should be doing with the bank, or how you should approach that conversation, that type of stuff. I want real world, actual tangible things that people can do here with the information. So people can just buy Farmer Metrics, which is great, or they can use the free version if they just want to use the balance sheet and cash flow. I guarantee you that's going to make a huge change in your life. It's going to change the perception of the bank on your operation massively. Because and this, again, it's painful to say it, but just by having that, you're going to be in the top 1% of customers in that bank, guaranteed at this point. And if you'd have told me that, 6 years ago, I would have challenged you on a little bit. We've had 300 plus customers from across the country that have come in, and so you can imagine the number of banks and stuff that we've heard back from and everything. It's the same thing across the board. The other option that people can come in with, which is where a majority of people do come in, is Legacy Farmer, our option for Legacy Farmer, which consists of coaching, consulting. So they get a coach that's going to onboard them and consult with them and help them make sure they're really utilizing the software, answer questions, help lead them through and making big decisions, help make sure that they're getting everything they need to from what we're doing here. But then we have the community piece of that as well. And so we had, like our hot seat call yesterday. We had 2 people come on. We had 2 individual hot seats there on how yesterday's topic specifically was on succession planning, bringing kids into the operation. What things do we need to have structured? What conversations do we need to have ahead of time? How am I going to navigate daughter-in-laws or son-in-laws coming in, and how do I approach that conversation? That type of stuff there, which, for you and me, we've been doing those calls since 2020. So we literally have over, 500 hours of those calls there, which, when you think about it, one of the most impactful quotes that I remember, guy wrote a book. His name was Keith Cunningham. He wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid, where he basically talks about all his mistakes. And I love that book. He talks about all his mistakes in the real estate industry, and he built this big $100 million portfolio, lost it all, that type of stuff there. But one of his quotes in there that has always stuck with me is that their success is actually found in learning what not to do versus learning what to do. And that always stuck with me, right? And that's why I said earlier, success in business today changes year after year, but I remember the mistakes that my granddad made. I remember the mistakes that my dad made, and those things stick with me and they shape my decisions today. You know what I mean? And so anyways, with our group there on the community side, we have 500 plus hours there of, imagine being a young farmer or business owner coming in and having access to the mistakes of 40, 50, and 60-year-olds and all the biggest financial mistakes they made, how it's impacted their marriage, how it led to alcoholism, how it led to all these different things there in their life, maybe no relationship with their kids or lawsuits with their family. That stuff is gold to people. Yeah. So the community piece is really important there. And then also, those people obviously get access to the software there. So that option right there is where a majority of people come in, just because it's more all inclusive there, right? We're learning, training, and educating people. At the same time, they're, mastering their numbers and using the software and things like that.
Yeah. So cool. I feel like we just got done with our conference, and I should have reached out to you months ago to see if you come out. I mean, because this is what, a lot of our members are demanding information like this on how to make these decisions, how to navigate growing these businesses up. And as you scale up, how to manage it. And I think there's just so many of us, people like us out there that started from ground zero and just trying to figure this out, and having a group of people to surround yourself with, to teach you what to do or what not to do in business, which is so cool.
And that's the thing too, is one thing I've always, cause like even with the podcast stuff, I've been told by like people on my team, like, oh, you need to pitch more and do that type of stuff. Okay. I get that. But at the same time though, I just want to be open and honest with people and just talk about my experience. And because most of the time when I talk about things, people can tell I'm being legitimate because the things that I'm talking about are painful in nature, right?
Yeah.
Or weren't good experiences and stuff like that. But, even like our call yesterday, right? So just like these types of conversations, most of the people on that call, like the 2 specific hot seats we had yesterday, deep down, the guys knew what they needed to do. But where people get stuck and where the benefit of having a community of people that are willing to help and want to share and want to, share what worked and not worked and that type of stuff there. These people, they know what to do, but they're looking for permission to be able to do it. And so like even yesterday's conversation around succession planning, it all ended with, hey, accepting and understanding that to some people in your family, you're going to end up being the a-hole. Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be the a-hole. So you might as well set it up the way that you want to. And that's going to, protect your life's work. And then we move forward that way. Right. But now we can get into specific legality issues and how you should have documents structured. People refer, talk about attorneys they've used and that type of stuff. So all those things, man, that's gold. But just that general conversation, that is what we've noticed inside the industry. It just doesn't exist in a lot of places. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jace, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. We're going to go ahead and put all your information down in the show notes. So if you listen to this, you'll find all the links to reach out, everything that Jace puts out there, and direct links to his website. But brother, man, thank you so much for just coming out and sharing your heart. I can tell. And again, I didn't want to steal your role. Like, it's just so similar, like the past. And I'm sure that's why Twerk, I said at the very beginning, was like, you guys need to meet each other. Your stories just intersect so well. And again, just helping that. I think when you have a passion, I know you can speak of this, but having a passion for that small farmer, trucker, business owner, that person that's struggling, I think that's, for me personally, that's why I found joy in life, when I can lift them up and I can see progress being made, families being touched, businesses succeeding. Man, there's just no greater joy in the world.
Yep, for sure. And that's the thing too, is even with what we do, it's definitely not easy, but the mission that we have here, that's why it's so impactful what we do. And I'm so grateful again that we had to go through, witnessing my family lose everything, because that made the mission of what we do here that much more meaningful, because it's real for me. Yeah. It's not a game. It's real. And I know what's going to happen if we don't get these issues solved for good people inside the industry.
Yeah. Jace, thanks so much for coming on, man. Yep. I know our paths will continue to cross, so I'm sure of that. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it and enjoyed being here.